Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro, friends. Today we're going to be talking about whether there is a gender pay gap in the coffee world or not. I work in the specialty coffee world, and so I'm going to speak to what I know. This is quite a contentious issue right now across the globe, and I want to preface this discussion by saying a couple of things. First of all, I do not like the term feminist. But if I were to define myself as a feminist, I would define feminist as women or humans who are pro equality for women. That's the beginning and the end of it. I want women to have the opportunity to have every choice to do whatever it is that they want for their lives. I want that for everybody, not just for women. The other thing I wanted to say is that I was raised in an environment where I was told that women are useless pretty much every day of my life. That being said, I went about the way of my life that was very counter to what I was raised to believe. I mean, imagine, my father was raised by his father to believe that women are worthless, and he gets dealt myself as a daughter. That was incredibly challenging for him. Having said that, what I'm about to say may surprise some people. Okay, so let's dive into the gender pay gap. This is something that I'm very interested in because as someone who was trained to think critically and trained to challenge every hypothesis and trained to challenge every piece of information that was in front of me, like most people, when I was confronted with the headlines about the gender pay gap, I fed into it. And I believed, of course women get paid less than men. But like with a bunch of other subjects, I thought, well, hold up. You need to decide for yourself if this is real or if it's just clickbait. And it's neither. What it is very complex. It's a very, very complex issue, and one to which we really need to start talking about, because I tested the waters online by asking if people believed that there was a gender pay gap in the coffee world. And a lot of people came back saying yes. Somebody said abso-fucking-lutely. Another person said, I'm sure there is, but in my workplace, 70% of the highest paid workers are all women. Actually, he said that wrong. The highest 70% of the people who were employed at his workplace were all women. And so what I'm hearing from a lot of the feedback that we're getting, and when I challenge people and say to them, why do you think that there's a gender pay gap in coffee? I usually get the same response, which is nothing. No response at all. I did receive one response from somebody who told me a bunch of anecdotal stuff that they weren't able to prove. And what I mean by that is that they were asked to do more work than their counterparts were doing, and they were not receiving as much pay as their counterparts, but were not able to corroborate were their counterparts, which were males, more skilled than they were, had they been employed longer with the company than they were, a whole bunch of other things. I am yet to find any evidence that men are paid more in the coffee world than women because they are men. And let's be clear, that's what the statement of a gender pay gap means. It means that men are paid more because they're men. It means that women are paid less because they're women. If we are looking at this very simplistically and saying that men earn more money than women, excuse me, then what we're saying is that the reason that they are getting paid more is because they are men, and the reason that women are getting paid less is because they're women. And while I'm not saying that that doesn't happen sometimes, what I am saying is that I have seen no evidence, and I've really dug. I have seen no evidence where that is the case. Whether it's the case in other industries, I'm not sure. And I want to add to that, when we talk about a gender pay gap, the complexity of this issue is so vast that making sweeping statements like there absolutely is a gender pay gap in the specialty coffee world is quite dangerous if you cannot back that up, because it immediately puts your credibility into play. And if you have some evidence for why there is a gap in the pay rates between men and women that's based on gender, please send it to me, lee@mapitforward.org. I'd love to see it. But the thing is that I have witnessed women that get paid shit, or women that get paid equally as shit as men are getting paid equally as shit. They're both getting paid minimum wage in a lot of countries. Men getting preferential treatment or preferential entry into jobs over women is a different problem than the gender pay gap. If you are complaining that men get preferential treatment over you as a woman, I would be much more willing to accept that than the fact that men are paid more than women in the coffee world. The only place that I can think it might exist is for roasters, because they can apparently carry more than women. But that's on the out as well. You see, I think that our industry is much more willing to pay people equally based on skill than most other industries. Excuse me. And the complexity of the gender pay gap goes even further when you start to look at the difference. I mean, it's unquestionable that if you have what they call an uncontrolled gender pay gap versus a controlled gender pay gap, what you notice is that men earn more than women in general. And the reason that happens is because if women take time off to have babies, women choose to take jobs that are typically lower earning. This is all evidence-based, mind you. Go to the website, go to payscale.com to see all of this. Excuse me. So the uncontrolled gender pay gap, this is where the median salary for men and women, there is a gap, and that gap is that for every dollar earned by men, women earn 79 cents. Okay? But if you look at a controlled gender pay gap, and the controlled gender pay gap is where the only thing that is different, so all other things being equal, where the skill set is the same, experience is the same, all the other variables are the same. The gender pay gap is that for every $1 earned by men, women earn 98 cents. Now, the reason that I'm pointing this out is not because I want to sit here and say, well, here, fuck you to all the social justice warriors who are saying that we've got to fight for the gender pay gap. That's not what I mean. What I want us to do is fuck the idea of a gender pay gap and let's just start taking care of each other regardless of our gender. Let's start looking after each other and ensuring that if somebody needs to be trained to get to where they want to get to, how about we help them do that as their employer? And as the employee, how about we stop complaining about a gender pay gap? And if we don't feel like we're being treated fairly where we're working, get the fuck out of there and go and find someone who is aligned with you, because that employer does not deserve you. If you feel that you are being treated unfairly, the only person that can change that is you, and it's not going to be in your best interest to fight and fight and fight and fight with an employer who is just not going to be willing to bend. I'm not saying don't fight. I'm not saying don't assert yourself. I'm saying try and assert yourself, and if it's not working, go and find somewhere else. Because if you're working for somebody who is stubborn and who is sexist, they're most likely going to continue to treat you in that way. But because you're being treated that way, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to treat you that way. I genuinely believe that if you are assertive, which means that you can communicate clearly what you want and you can communicate it fairly, you are going to be able to find an employer who is going to meet you at that communication level. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, because there are a lot of people who own businesses in the specialty coffee world or in the coffee world in general who got there because of a low barrier to entry. And we're not there yet. We're not at that place where everyone is as professional as they should be, but there are professionals out there. It's important for you to learn, and this is something that I'm really passionate about because I'm going to be getting the industry training on this with my psychologist friend Jamie Berry, who is coming on the podcast in a couple of weeks. It is important that you take ownership of your negotiation skills. It is important that you take control of your negotiating skills. It is important that you take care of choosing the correct employer for you and the right environment for you. Just because somebody treats you like shit, it doesn't mean you have to stay there. It also doesn't mean that across the board that's how it is. You are responsible for being a professional. You are responsible for learning how to negotiate your own wage. And if you do that unemotionally, if you do that logically, and we've already talked about how you do that on this podcast. If you want to learn how to take a pay rise, go listen to one of the very early episodes of the Daily Coffee Pro. If you are presenting yourself as a professional, regardless of your gender, there is such a greater likelihood that you are going to be front runner for any position, because the people who are being professional in this industry are so few. So if what you do is focus on being a professional in the coffee industry rather than being a female professional or a male professional or a transgender professional, and finding it necessary to slot yourself into a minority group to get yourself ahead so that you have an agenda, you're going to be missing the point. We're professionals, regardless of what our biology or our gender identity is. Focus on being a coffee professional and you will earn more money for your business. You will be a stellar employee. And if you're unappreciated, leave. That employer doesn't deserve you anyway. There are absolutely people who have it, undeniably have it worse than other people. Women of color have it much harder than anybody when it comes to pay rates in pretty much every country. And these things, look, like most things, everything's shifting now. My grandmother's era, the gender pay gap was huge, but the gender pay gap was huge because women were not encouraged to go to work at all. So when they did get jobs, they earned pennies on the dollar compared to men. But as the generations have moved on to today, the gender pay gap has become so close. And I believe it exists purely because of the older women that are still working in these jobs, pretty much grandfathered into the current system that we're in. But I promise you that if you look at the science and you look at the data and you look at the analysis, this idea of a gender pay gap is going to eventually disappear. Women are outscoring men in exams at college, in college entrance, more women are getting more senior positions, making the hard decisions to decide, no, I don't want to have a family, I want to have a career. That's happening more and more and more. And as that happens and we start to take leadership roles, it is our responsibility to hire and to be more fair, to hire women who are skilled for the jobs. Okay? I'm not saying there hire only women because they're women. When I hire, and I've hired every kind of minority group you can imagine. I've hired transgender, I've hired people of color, I've hired men, I've hired women, I've hired every spectrum of the LGBTQI community. I've hired all different ages. There are good professionals across the board and there are shit professionals across the board. I am always going to be looking for skill. And if you're looking to work for someone like that, come and talk to me. I'm always looking for good people because I seem to struggle to find good people, but I'm not alone. And so what I'm saying to you is I'm inviting you to take your gender out of the equation and focus on your professionalism. Stop making the conversation about gender and start making the conversation about how much of a fucking badass you have chosen to be. Learn the skills that you need to be the best and biggest badass that you can be. Your evolutionary conditioning is going to be against you if you are born biologically as a woman. You're evolutionarily programmed towards more empathy and towards more compassion. You are not evolutionarily programmed towards competitiveness, aggressiveness, and assertion. Okay? So knowing that, your job is to go and get assertiveness training. Learn how to be assertive. Learn how to negotiate. And we're going to help you with that. Jamie Berry and I both believe that the silver bullet to fixing pretty much 90% of the community problems that exist in the world is through communication, and particularly teaching everyone to be assertive. And so we Mapper Forward is going to make sure that we provide the opportunity for everyone who wants it to have it. And we're looking at getting it somewhere around June. And if you are focused on being assertive, then you are going to badass your way through all the blocks that are put in front of you. If you're a woman, you're going to have to work harder. Suck it up. It's just the way that it is. After 44 years of trying to figure out what the fuck I'm doing wrong and why men get it easier than me, I can tell you that it's just the way that it is. But that's not a gender pay gap issue. That's a cultural issue. And it's the way that it is. I'm sick of fighting it. If I have to be twice as badass as the men around me, okay, that's fine. I'll do that. I'm the one who's going to win for it. And I've just accepted that. It's going to eventually change. But the only reason it's going to change is because of women like me and women who I have learnt from to just be as great as I can be. And so I'm going to invite people to challenge themselves about this issue of the gender pay gap. If you believe it exists and you have proof that it exists, again, please point it out to me. Perhaps I'm wrong. I can find no evidence of it. And it's at this point that I want to invite you to do something that is very uncool right now. I'm going to invite you to question everything that you hear and you read. Don't just believe it because your friends believe it. Don't buy into it because it feels safe to be in a group of people that want to believe a ton of bullshit. Look into it. Ask questions. Challenge things. Challenge your friends. Have discussions with people who don't agree with you. It would be very cool for me to get on here and say, yes, fuck everyone. Men are all fucked because there's a gender pay gap issue and I want all women to be making not just the same as men, more than men because of blah, 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 blah. But it's just not the case. It's just not the case. There are men out there that are struggling just as hard as women because of shit pay. So we've got to do better at spreading the right information. On that note, I'm going to bid you adieu and wish you a wonderful rest of your day. I'm sorry this one went a little longer than usual, but I'm a bit passionate about this one. Peace, love and peanut butter, friends. Have a great day.